Hello everyone and welcome to Coproduce Care's Chat for Care. My name's Sophie Chester-Glynn and I am Director at Coproduce Care Community Interest Company. We're a non-profit organisation doing everything that we can to democratise the care debate. Over the last few months, we've been bringing you interviews from people from MPs to the regulator, Kate Tironi, to people with lived experience and many, many more. And we are really looking forward to doing more of those in the autumn and later in the summer. As always, as I say on these programs, please, we are a non-profit organisation. We aren't funded. We are full of volunteers and people who work in social care. So we want these views and these conversations to be shared with as many people as possible. So please, 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 if you could just share, subscribe, like to our page. If you're on Facebook, then like. If you are on YouTube, then make sure that you subscribe and you press the bell, because if you don't press the bell, you won't know when we go live. So very important tip. And of course, bring more and more people to the channel by sharing it with your colleagues and anybody you think needs to know more about the social care sector. So without further ado, I'm going to talk to you about our guest tonight. So we have Kathryn Smith. Now, Kathryn is the brand new Chief Executive of the Social Care Institute for Excellence. Most people know it as SCIE, SCIE. So we're going to be a bit cruel because Kathryn actually joined SCIE as the new CEO a few months ago, right at the start of lockdown. So she told me the other day that she's actually never really properly been into the office, but she's very kindly agreed to do a chat for care with us and talk about SCIE, who it is, what it's been doing throughout the COVID pandemic and supporting organisations. And I know it's been doing a lot to try and get messages out there, trying to dissect the government guidance and put it into bite-sized chunks and much, much more. So we're going to hear all about that. And I hope that you all are not boiling too much in the heat. It's very muggy this evening. It was 33 degrees in Bristol where we are yesterday. So we've got every aircon fan on at the moment. So well done if you're tuning in and you're staying cool. And last thing from me is to make sure that you get to the, oh, thank you, Matthew, for subscribing. We get the chat going. So any thoughts or any conversations that you want to get going, then do that in the chat. Feel free to say hi. And also, please do get your questions in for Kathryn. No question is too simple or too basic. If you're thinking it, then probably I'm thinking it and everybody else. So just put it in for Kathryn. So really excited to have Kathryn on this evening. So I will bring Kathryn into the stream. Hello, Kathryn. How are you?
Hi there. Really good to be here.
Really lovely to see you tonight. And I hope you're comfortable because I'm just about staying cool in the heat right now.
Yeah, well, I live in the north, so I'm not. It's not that warm here,
isn't it?
No. Yeah, it's been really. It has been quite hot over the last few days, although not as hot as London. Today it's very cloudy, actually. Although I haven't left the house, so I don't know how warm it is, but it looks very cloudy.
You are so lucky. I feel like I need to move there right now. I'm
jealous. I haven't the
heat. So where should we start? Let's start with you. And so you're brand new to SCIE, and you've actually got a great breadth of experience across social care. So what have you been doing before and kind of working up to being involved in SCIE?
Well, I started off in social care as a 13-year-old schoolgirl working in a care home, which of course isn't legal now, but it was then. I got hooked. It started off as a Saturday job and I got hooked. I absolutely loved it. So I carried on in social care ever since. I've worked for lots of different local authorities, social services departments. I worked very briefly for the NHS. I had 2 years as an inspector. And in the last 10 years, I've been working for charities. So I was Director of Services for Scope, the disability charity, for 2 or 3 years. And then I moved to Alzheimer's Society, where I've been for the last 8 years. And my most recent job there was Chief Operating Officer. And I've had some personal experience of accessing social care as well for family and friends, and family really. So yeah, I mean, it's at the heart of what I do. I'm social care through and through. It's all I've ever done really, and I'm very committed to high quality social care, which is why this job screamed out to me really.
That's lovely. And I think when you have people talking about being leaders in social care, it's really powerful when you've got someone who's got that lived experience as well as the practical experience, because it is, sometimes I think we forget that social care is all about what you do from the heart. It's full of people who care about people. And I know we've got process, and I know we've got guidelines and things we've got to go by, and we do that, but at its core we are person-centered, and it's nice to hear about a leader who's had that experience, and I think that's really important. So talk about SCIE. What is SCIE? And also I think it's interesting to find the link between what it is now and what it was when it was created, I don't know, 15 years ago maybe?
20 years ago, yes. Yeah. So as I say, I've only been here since May, so I have been aware of SCIE throughout the last 20 years as a person working in social care and accessing SCIE's resources, of course. But when SCIE was originally set up, it was set up entirely by Department of Health funding, as it was then, Department of Health, to research, improve and influence best practice in social care, very much using the voice of lived experience. But over the 20 years, the funding from Department of Health has reduced, and SCIE's been expected to be more independent. SCIE is a registered charity, and we need to look at different ways of bringing money in. What's at the heart of what we do hasn't changed. We're still here to champion high quality health and social care. But what I'm looking at now is the strategy for SCIE over the next 3 years. And I think that SCIE's done a lot of work to provide research and input into what good quality social care should look like and what people have told us would make a difference to their lives. And we've provided guidance, we've provided training, we've provided consultancy on that. And I think that that's all really great, and we'll carry on doing that. But the other thing I'd like us to do is have a really strong voice on what the future of social care should look like, as informed to us by people that access social care or work in social care, what's working, what's not working. And I'd really like us to be more and more of a sort of critical friend to government to help to influence policy and practice in the future.
Yeah, and that's interesting how you talk about the lack in funding, because actually organisations like yourselves are really powerful in connecting what we need in social care to people. So one of the things that I've known you've been doing is looking at the guidance for COVID-19 and trying to provide information that is more accessible for people. So I think that's somewhere on your website. I know that we've got a screenshot of a tweet that you put up, cutting through the noise, that the SCIE Social Care Hub. So talk to us about the hub and what that does.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, lots of guidance was produced when the pandemic first started, and I think people were tripping over themselves a bit really to produce guidance. But what became quite clear is that some of the guidance hadn't really been written by people that had access of either providing or receiving services, and so some of it in practical terms wasn't always as useful as it could be. And either way, there's so much guidance cutting through and getting to grips with what it's actually needed and what would be useful to people in terms of supporting people to either access or deliver services better, was lacking really. So we've worked with the Department of Health and Social Care to look at how we can produce a hub where we can try and make sense of that to people and try and get it into a more organised fashion so that people can find what they're looking for more easily and access that guidance more easily. And we're also looking at how we can work with Department of Health to get some of that guidance to be accessible in different formats for when it's needed, and also to look at training and webinars. And you know, we've had some feedback. I've actually been chairing the task force advisory group on good practice guidance and innovation. a lot of the feedback that we had that came to us was that much of the guidance wasn't produced in a format that is accessible, for example, in easy read. And that's true. And the reason that happened a lot is because the people that were producing the guidance or commissioning the guidance were thinking of providers. And of course, whilst you're thinking of providers, you're not considering all of those people that are self-directed care and support, so people that are commissioning their own support, if you like. And so we really want to look at how we can support the Department of Health and Social Care and others, Public Health England and others that are producing guidance to make sure it's accessible to the right people when they need it.
That is so spot on, because like you say, sometimes the information just targeted, obviously you need to make sure that we get information to providers, but also it's people who are using services as well. And even if for anybody, if you have accessible information, whether it's for registered managers or people who work in social care, the more accessible it is, the easier people are going to find it to follow. I know that one of the bits of feedback I got from our managers was that there's just so much guidance, and it's coming a lot, and obviously we need it, but just having it broken down is just so useful. Another thing that I know that you do in terms of helping people to find information accessible is you also have webinars that you do. So you've had a webinar recently around COVID-19 and care providers, and you had some great names on that one. And then also, people like Clinton Farquharson and the leader Alex Fox of Shared Lives, who we've interviewed before. And you've got a YouTube channel where people can catch up on that. So that's another way of getting information out. Do you think you'll carry on doing more of those?
Yeah, absolutely. And we found that they are so valued by carers, by professionals, by people directing their own care, whatever. And actually, for some people, it makes much more sense to people when they hear somebody talking about the guidance or when they've got an opportunity to ask questions. So we've been trying to look at what is the key guidance that really would benefit from having some sort of interpretation around it and delivery around webinars. And we want to do that as much as possible, actually. I think that that's one of the key avenues for delivery. If you're a carer, unpaid or in a care home, for example, you haven't got time to sit rifling through loads and loads of guidance to find the right thing for you. So if somebody can help to deliver the key points to you and give you the opportunity to ask questions, I think that's really helpful, and that's what our webinars are designed to do.
Brilliant. I know that when we were talking before, we discussed, on the point of being accessible and making sure that you have people's views heard. And it was lovely to hear actually in the advisory group that you had obviously reached out to people to find out what their views were and brought those into the your advisory group recommendations, probably, I don't know. But the other thing that the reason I know even about the word co-production is through a training I did with Tina Coldman. And this must have been about 4 years ago, probably. And I was like, oh, what? Another buzzword? But actually, by the end of the training session, I was so hooked, I ended up creating Coproduce Care. Because I was convinced that we needed to do more co-production. But you do have a lot of resources around co-production. And every year you do Co-Pro Week. I don't think we've got any overlays to put on Co-Production Week, but can you talk to us about how you adapted Co-Production Week during COVID-19 and what is Co-Pro Week on a normal year?
Yeah, absolutely. And co-production is at the heart of what SCIE does. And we strongly believe that social care should be designed and influenced by the people that receive it. Everybody knows what's best for them better than anybody else, really. Everybody knows what will make a difference to them. And so the more people that we can get to help to design and create the solutions within social care, the better. So that's what co-production does in a nutshell. And we've held Co-Production Week every year to raise awareness of co-production, to bring it into the minds of people that are commissioning or providing or receiving services, and to really show them the benefits of co-production and the difference it can make. And it probably goes without saying that co-production week is co-produced. So people that access services, support and care are the people that design ultimately what co-production week looks like. And usually we have some kind of festival. And, you know, last year, I wasn't here, but last year we had an amazing festival that everybody really enjoyed, and it really helped to bring to the front some of the real work of our people working within co-production. And of course, that wasn't possible this year. So this year we did an online co-production week, and the members of our co-production steering group ultimately designed and delivered co-production week with some support from some of the SCIE staff. And we had blogs, we had videos, we had webinars. You know, obviously we were tweeting about it, we were talking about it on social media, and it was again, it was really well received. It was a really successful week. We had a lot of people engaging with us, a lot of people that hadn't necessarily known about co-production that have come back to us for more information, and people that, you know, that access care and support that would really like to be more involved, finding out more ways that they could be involved and how they could make a difference. So it was a really, really good week. Obviously not quite as, probably not quite as much fun as the festival, but nevertheless, it was a very successful week, I think.
Yeah, it did. It was actually. And I would listen to some of the things that people were doing, and we shared lots of information. And also it prompted me to do a blog as well about it, and just rethinking about what co-production is. And actually during this time, we need to do co-production now more than ever, because we need those views of how people are experiencing care to find out what we do next. What do we do for the next stage, for the inevitable second wave? How do we make better policy? How do we involve people with lived experience? So I think it's really important. So talking now a bit more about COVID-19 and sort of reflecting back on when it was all happening and how the sector was dealing with it, and almost thinking about lessons learned, I suppose, lessons learned. Was there anything that you felt in terms of the good things around what we've learned in social care from your perspective, from being in SCIE those few months when it was all kicking off, that you feel has really benefited the sector in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of lessons learned. I think there's a lot of things that, should we ever be in this situation again, which I hope we won't be, we learn. But I definitely think that there are things that have gone really well. So, for example, as I said, I've been in social care since I was 13, which is a long time. And I've never heard social care mentioned on the news in the public as much as it has been during the pandemic. And social care has always been a poor relation to health, I think. And you know, I think there is a very definite interdependency between health and social care, but actually there are many people that access social care that don't access health services by virtue of their social care needs. And so they are definitely two different things. And so I think one of the positives about COVID is that it has raised awareness of social care and got social care on the political agenda, on the public agenda. You know, it's talked about in the news much more and in papers, and it's kind of brought it into people's living rooms. So you know, it's not just on documentaries that people might not watch. It's been on the regular news. So I think that that's been a real positive. What I would say is that we need to make sure that people understand, and that we continue to raise the narrative, and people that understand that whilst care homes are a really important part of social care, they're not social care in its entirety, and we need to make sure that we raise the profile of social care as a whole, and the difference that we need to make to social care to fix the system in the future. I think one of the other areas where we have really learned is about technology-enabled care and how we could use that better. I think that there is still a lot more we can do with technology-enabled care, but we have demonstrated that we can do far more than we thought. So, for example, some of the things that I've had fed back to me is that traditionally social workers wouldn't do assessments over video, for example. They'd go out and do them face-to-face. Now, of course, there is a definite place for a face-to-face conversation. I'm not disputing that. But in some instances, the video call has worked just as well. And it's meant that in some instances, social workers have managed to get through more people because they've not had to factor in travelling time. And so that's really beneficial. So I think one of the things that we've learned is that we can use technology more than we do. And the thing that I think needs to come out of this is being clear on when we should use technology and when actually the face-to-face contact is really important and we shouldn't lose that. Equally, it's shown us that technology hasn't worked for everybody, because a large proportion, I think it's 60%, but forgive me if I got that wrong, but 60% of care homes, for example, are not connected up technically. And many people, individuals receiving care and support are not connected up technically, which means that those people have really struggled just now. So it's raised awareness for, first of all, how useful technology can be, but secondly, how important it is that we get that technology rolled out and available to everybody so that we can make the best use of that. Whether that happens, because we need to put money behind these things, is a different matter, but I certainly think that there's been some good lessons learned there.
I think that's just a beautiful summary of technology. It's the good and the bad, and it's recognizing that everybody's learning. And I like the fact that you recognize that it was also social workers who are getting used to technology, because sometimes I know that there are a few homes that aren't as hooked up with technology. I think that's basically the fact that it's like a home. So you're face to face with it. By the nature of it, you see the people face to face on a normal day that you need to see. So the technology hasn't been such a big need as it is now. But often I found the resistance to technology isn't necessarily within care homes. It's actually the professionals, the commissioners and the social workers and the GPs who have been resisting the move to technology. But now everyone's forced to do it. It's now, well, really just flick a switch and we're doing it. So the whole sector is learning about technology and its benefits. And the fact that you picked up that it's not going to cure everything, which I think some people got excited at the beginning that it would. The nuances that you get from face-to-face contact, whether it's with your GP or your social worker, if there's a safeguarding issue, you're not going to get from technology. So absolutely right, there does need to be some better thinking around it in terms of how we use it in the sector. So moving on to thinking about what are the other types of change, maybe the things that haven't gone quite as well. Is there anything that you could see happening whilst COVID was really confusing everybody? I mean, it's kind of calmed down a little bit now, but it was really stressful a few months ago, that you think that just never needs to happen again?
Yeah, absolutely. And when COVID first sort of happened, I was still working at Alzheimer's Society, and we got an awful lot of communication from mainly family carers, but for example, the care home situation, that people were, the care homes were I wouldn't say they were deliberately forgotten, but they certainly weren't in the forefront of the minds of the policymakers at the time, or or people that were planning what needed to happen. And I had experience personally. My own aunt died in a care home with COVID, and in that care home, there were 2 people that were displaying symptoms, and they were sent to the care home, sent them to hospital, and the hospital sent them straight back. Well, it's absolutely no surprise that then spread around the care home, which it did. And quite a few people died in that care home. And I think, unfortunately, despite care homes' best efforts, and many care homes really tried very hard to manage this in very, very difficult circumstances, that the lack of consistency and clarity around hospital discharges and things meant that it was very, very difficult. And that does mean that I believe more people died in care homes than should have done had we managed that better. So I think that that's a definite learning. And I think we only got the tip of the iceberg on that, actually. I think if we'd have looked more into what was happening in home care and in self-directed support. I mean, I've spoken to some of my colleagues who received self-directed support, and they just quite simply couldn't get an answer. Their carers were told not to travel, not to come to work, and there was nobody that the person needing the service could speak to about that and get advice. They didn't know how to advise their own employees, if you like. And so that kind of thing really did fall down a crack. But on the good side, and I forgot to mention this when you asked me about the positives, on the positives, this same person told me that for the first time in the history of him having a personal budget, he was told by his social services department, you spend it however you like, whatever will help you right now, you spend it. And he was like, yay, first time in my life I've actually been allowed to spend my personal budget in a way that will help me. And that has got to be some real learning for us about how we how we manage personal budgets and how we manage people's care. And my memory of when personal budgets were first brought in is that that was always the intention, but bureaucracy kind of stopped that from happening. And I think one of the things that COVID has done is by necessity taken away some of that bureaucracy, and in those senses the outcome was good. But I think, as I say, the people that have struggled to bring that to the forefront shouldn't have happened, and hopefully we've picked that up now and that won't happen.
Yeah, and I think that is it. Do you think that the systems, the people who work in the systems are just becoming more human now because of COVID? I hope so, because we just need to get back to a place of what can we do as social care to make things better for people and their lives. And time, I get people saying, what about personal budgets? What about PAs, people who employ their own staff? People really feel neglected, on top of people other in social care and in care homes. Their PAs really feel neglected, and people who employ them. So I think that's a takeaway that we hope. I know the government has got that task force, and obviously you're in an advisory group. I'm in a different advisory group, and I really hope that something comes out for them going forward, because I do really feel bad that they just weren't thought of. And someone has asked here, and I'll ask it to you in case you understand. They're asking what you mean by culture. Can you clarify?
I think they're referring to somebody else's comment. I was looking at that at the same time.
Not paying attention. Sorry. Okay, fine, good. I thought I'd missed you talk about culture. What am I doing? That's fine. So in terms of pulling things together with local authorities, one of the things that you do is you support local authorities in SCIE, is to support local authorities to understand what co-production means, how to do it, good examples. So talk to us a bit about those local authorities you've worked with and what your role has been in supporting them.
Yeah, so we work with any agency that wants to work with us on how to embed co-production and how to support teams to understand what co-production means and how it can work. And I think, we completely accept that it takes longer to do something in a truly co-produced way, but the outcome is better, and the outcome is, doing it that way is actually more efficient in the longer term. So a couple of local authorities have commissioned us to work with them on developing their co-production. One was Oxfordshire. We've had some fantastic results with our project in Oxfordshire. It's been really, really good. Really, Oxfordshire have really embraced co-production, and they've got a really good ethic about that there, that we've enjoyed working with them. And recently Coproduce have done the same, and they've commissioned us to do some more work, which we're starting with them soon. And what that's about is about looking at their practice in a specific area. So it might be working within their learning disabilities department, for example. It might be with older people. It might be across the board. That's entirely up to them. But working with them on how they develop their service offer, how they come up with transformations, with new ways of working, how they manage their assessments, their practice, and how they make sure that they are doing all of this in a co-produced way. And by that, it doesn't mean in consultation, it doesn't mean talking to people, it means doing the work with people. So having people that have lived experience directly as part of the working group that's making these changes. So we've really enjoyed working with Oxfordshire, and looking forward to doing the same with Kirklees. And hopefully we'll have some really good outcomes from the Oxfordshire situation that we'll be able to share in a joint way with Oxfordshire and increase people's learning elsewhere, perhaps through webinars or whatever else as well, to make that more accessible for people.
See, I love the fact that you're working with local authorities, and I think it helps to have that. But I wonder whether your work with local authorities needs to be mandatory in some way, because I've had way too much contact with local authorities who really don't understand how to do co-production, or want to do it but not quite sure how to go about it, and the instant reaction is it's too hard, it's too costly, and it really frustrates me, because I think if we're not here to improve the lives of the people we support, then why are we here? We have to give it a good shot to try and involve them. There's way too much technology and connection with our communities not to be able to do it in some kind of way. So do you feel that local authorities are listening to you, and do you think there's a space for your type of work to become mandatory for all local authorities to have some kind of co-production advisor?
Do you know, I would love it if that happened. I think that would be really, really good, because I agree with you. And we've been talking about co-production for years. We've been talking about it since I worked in local authorities, which was more than 10 years ago. And even then, for probably 10 years. So we've known about co-production for a long time. And I think you're quite right that it is more complicated, it is more costly, it does sometimes go into the too difficult box, or we pay lip service to it in different ways. And actually, if we can really support organisations, local authorities, to see the difference, the impact it could make, then they would see that that investment is worthwhile. Unfortunately, because a lot of these projects don't get follow through, it's difficult for people without having this input to see the difference it can make and see why that investment's worthwhile. But ultimately, if people have got the kind of care and support that really does make their lives better, then they are less likely to continue to need more and more expensive care, or to need to keep changing their care package or whatever else. And so there is efficiencies of that, as well as you quite rightly say, I agree with you 100%. Why are we here in social care if it's not to improve people's lives? And if the input that we are giving people is simply maintenance, then yes, that's still essential, I don't doubt that. But on its own, in my view, it's not enough. And we should be looking at how we are enhancing people's lives. And, and I think co-produced care, that's your name, isn't it? That co-produced care is the way of doing that. It's the way of getting the right answer earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose a lot of this needs to come from leadership from the top. And I know Helen Whately is the care minister, and she has been on the show before, very earlier on in the when we started doing these live streams. We've been doing videos like this since last year, but a live stream like this, she was, I think, maybe the third or fourth person we had on. But you've managed to have a roundtable with her recently. What were your recommendations to her, and was she quite receptive to them?
Yes, absolutely. I watched your chat with her live, actually, when you did that. It was really good. Yeah. So we invited lots of different people throughout the sector to give us their thoughts on, having raised the profile of social care through the pandemic. Everybody within social care has known for a long time that we need some change. Everybody within social care has been waiting for white papers and green papers forever, it seems, and for an answer on the budget. And my personal view is that if we don't grasp this nettle now, whilst we have got that spotlight on social care, then we've really missed a trick. And I actually discussed this with the Minister, Helen Whately, fairly early on in my induction meeting with her, and she was of the same mind. I'm sure she would like to be the minister that makes a difference for social care. So we asked various leaders, commissioners, people that use services to send us their blogs, do a podcast with us, and really take some viewpoints on what they would recommend needs to change and how it would change. And then we brought all of that together in a round table that we invited the Minister to share that. And we're now in the middle of publishing the findings of that. And the Minister was really, really receptive to the kind of conversations that we had, and really interested in hearing about people's viewpoints. And ultimately, the main recommendations are: do not lose this moment. Let's do something with it. Recognising that we do need a response in terms of funding. We're not going to be able to solve the problems if we don't solve the funding issue. But the whole problem isn't funding. Some of it's about how we do things. Some of it's about about governance and the way we work. It's about how agencies work together, and it's about how we involve people in care. And some of it's really about innovation, because what we have to be really careful of is it's very, very difficult for any of us to think about the kind of care we might want in the future if we ever need it. In the absence of what anything different might look like, we tend to revert to what's already there. And, you know, experience is, if you go to the GP, for example, and that's what most people that haven't accessed social care through their lives do, if you go to the GP because you're starting to think you might need some social care, the GPs are very likely to recommend a care home, because that's the only thing that they know about quite often. And the care home isn't necessarily the right thing. So one of the things that we did ask the Minister to take on board is how we might really innovate and get a social care system that really is fit for the future and really does make a difference to people's lives. And, you know, as I say, we're working on that now, and hopefully we'll be able to publish something on that and share it with the Minister and others. But she was very engaged in the conversations we had, so hopefully that will lead to something.
Good. And that's promising to hear that she was really interested in what you're saying and receptive. I do think, I don't know politics very well, but I do wonder how much power ministers have to make change. But presumably they have the ear of the Matt Hancock and Department of Health and Social Care and the Prime Minister. So there's hope. There's hope. But before I go, I want to ask you about that vision of what care might look like. But before I do, just a reminder to everyone, thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, share with your friends if you find this interesting. There's people who have been logged on and continue to watch us. So do share, do like, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you are watching us on YouTube, if it's on Facebook, then like it, because we like to know that you're enjoying what we're doing. So it makes us feel loved. So yeah, please do all of that. And what I wanted to talk about is I did have a podcast which we filmed a while ago with Alex Fox, who I mentioned earlier, and he has a book about social care and how it's working and not working, and whether how we do social care is right. And when we spoke a couple of days ago, you talked about whether social care is working for people. Is it what you meant about what you were saying earlier about care homes being the form that people automatically think about in terms of social care? Is there something else? Is there rumblings of a different way we should do care that you're hearing about?
Yeah, and I think, you know, my personal perspective is that social care isn't working. I think the system is broken, and that largely comes down, actually, some of you people have commented, I've noticed on the chat, that, you know, funding has been cut in real terms over the years, which means that, you know, I remember when I first got into the system, the eligibility threshold, so the level at which people could receive social care, was much greater than it is now. So people need to be in pretty dire straits to access social care right now, which means that by the time they're accessing it, the support they need is much greater than it might have otherwise have been, you know, if we could support people in a way that benefited them. And, you know, I personally am quite fond of care homes. I started off in care homes, and if I needed care, then I personally would probably quite like a care home, because I'm quite a sociable person. I'd like that company. But it's not the right answer for everybody. And most people, given a choice, would choose to be supported to remain living in their own homes as long as possible. And we haven't got that right yet. So if I use a personal example, my granddad ended up needing care, and I just couldn't get the right support for him to stay at home. Now, you bear in mind the job I do and the connections I've got, and he actually was living in the council that I used to be one of the senior directors on, which means I had direct access to the right people, and I still couldn't get him the right support he needed to stay at home. And he ended up we had no choice but to move him into a care home because we couldn't support him at home, and he died a week later. And I'm convinced to this day that that's because he gave up. It wasn't the life he wanted. And to me, we should, in a society such as ours, be able to support people that need support in a way that works for them, in an environment that works for them. And we just haven't got that right yet, in my view. And there's such a lot of work and good ideas out there. And as I say, all the conversations we've had about co-production, people that need to access care and support know what difference would make to them. And we need to get that right. And I think hopefully some of the work we're doing now to talk about social care reform and to think about the future, hopefully we'll get some of that out there, and we can start to really see a difference.
Absolutely. And I'm really sorry to hear about your father. That's a really touching story. But I think that there is a lot of change that needs to happen. People are starting to think about what that change needs to be like. And I think it's great that we're thinking about involving people with lived experience more. That is just absolutely crucial. And informed choice, someone's saying, on the type of care that people should get. And a reminder to people, do ask, get your questions in for Kathryn if you have any about SCIE or anything that she said. But I do feel like SCIE does try to involve people as much as possible. And can you talk to us about the ways that SCIE has got people with lived experience involved in the work that it does, and also the other organisations that you work with? Because it wasn't until we talked that I realised that SCIE hosts, I think you said, TLAP, which is very much all about co-production and people with lived experience, and changing the way that we support people. So yes, talk about co-production in SCIE and the organisations that you work with.
Yeah, so in a couple of ways. So SCIE has its own co-production steering group. So that steering group meets quite regularly, and we also have a co-production network that link in with the steering group. And that steering group looks at how SCIE is operating. For example, we had a restructure recently, and the steering group commented on the restructure. They commented on our strategy and what we do in the future and where we can make a difference. And they get involved in specific pieces of work. So if we're delivering training or webinars or consultancy or whatever else, we'll involve members from the co-production network or the steering group as is appropriate. We always involve somebody from the co-production steering group if we're interviewing. So they're very much involved both in how we run the organisation internally, but also in the products we produce externally. And then in terms of how we work in partnership, so SCIE's hosted the TLAP partnership pretty much since it was set up for 10 years. And so the Think Local Act Personal Partnership is a partnership it has over 50 members, and it has the TLAP Partnership Board that sit within that. And again, they work very much with co-production at the heart of what they do. And the National Co-Production Advisory Group works with the TLAP Partnership Board, and the chair of the TLAP Partnership Board is a member of the National Co-Production Advisory Group. And on that partnership, we have members of other organisations. We have the president of the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services. We have somebody from Department of Health and Social Care. We have somebody from CQC, and lots of representatives from some of the key organisations, as well as, of course, as people that access care and support. And the main aim of the Think Local Act Personal Partnership has been about producing social care in a really personalised, outcomes-focused way, and that sort of remains at the heart of what the TLAP partnership does. But it evolves all the time. You know, there are new things that they're looking at all the time, and SCIE is obviously very proud to be hosting that partnership and to be a part of that.
And does SCIE do any research at all? I'm just looking at a comment then where someone said we need to do more comparative research and share great models of care from around the world. I've never heard you do any research, but is that something that you might do, or do you know organisations you link up who do research?
We do actually do research. Okay. Unfortunately, this is an area of our funding that has reduced quite significantly. So we can only do research if we're commissioned to do it now, you know, if somebody pays us to do it. But I am looking at how we could bring in some voluntary income. We are a registered charity after all. So I am looking at how we could maybe get some sponsorship or some support to do that kind of research, because I agree entirely, that's exactly what we need. We need to look at the best models of care around the country, around the world, and the difference that this has made to people's lives to really inform what we do in the future. And I think things like that are done in isolation or on a smaller scale, and it can be available. And it might even be just that it's a review of all of that study that's already been done. But I think it would be really, really helpful if we could do something like that, and if we could use that to inform our recommendations for what, you know, the future social care looks like.
Absolutely. I wonder about, with all the organisations you were just talking about, there's lots of them. I'm aware of them and I kind of know how they all fit together. But some of the criticisms that people have with social care, you hear in the media as being, well, it's so big, it's so fragmented, it's really hard to connect with social care. Do you think we should have a national care service to bring it all together?
Wow, that's a big question. I agree with you that it's very fragmented, and I think one of the issues, and I've talked about this recently with some colleagues and partners from different organisations, is that, you know, when the government or when the Department of Health and Social Care want to speak to the NHS and how the NHS works, they have one body effectively to talk to. When they want to speak to social care, they have hundreds, and that makes it more fragmented and more difficult. And I think sometimes probably leads to a bit of a default to health when it should be social care, thinking about some of these things. So I definitely think we need some kind of forum to bring all of that together. And in some ways, you know, SCIE or the Think Local Act Personal Partnership could be that. But as an example, I've pulled together some of the large players in this field to talk about the comprehensive spending review and see where we've got commonality and what we think about the comprehensive spending review and what it means for social care and how we can input into that so that we can try and have a single voice. But, you know, I have my own personal view on what I think social care could look like in the future, including how it's funded. And I have no qualms sharing my personal view. But I think that SCIE needs to and will develop a view for SCIE that is based on what people that are accessing, that have lived experience of social care, support and care can tell us, and so that we can put that view forward. But I definitely think that there needs to be some kind of forum that helps to put social care on the same footing, for different reasons, but the same footing as how NHS can have those kind of debates. I don't personally believe that social care should be a part of the NHS, which I know is another conversation going round. I'm not saying that might not be SCIE's view, because if that's what people with lived experience tell us, then that's where we'll go. But my personal view is that isn't the right answer, because there are so many parts of social care that are not about health, that are separate to health, that we definitely need to work better and in a more integrated way with health services.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I don't know enough about this maybe, but I feel like the jury's out in terms of this fragmented argument, because actually the NHS has a name, but the NHS is made up of so many different parts. Yeah. I don't know whether social care is made up of so many different parts, but just doesn't have a name, because you're full of different parts of the NHS, the CCGs. Outside of that, there's, I suppose, the local authorities, there's GPs. There's a lot going on in the health world, which I don't think is any less fragmented than social care. But that's my point of view. I don't know the NHS as well. And I feel like there's enough big players within social care, with your National Care Forum, with yourself, with the UKHCA, with the Martin Green, head of Care England. I feel there's enough of like a handful of big players. If you needed measures to get out, it would get out through them, and it would get out to a lot of social care. Again, PAs I would struggle with, but I don't know whether that's a rhetoric to make it seem as if social care is really distant and really hard to reach. And in reality, we're not, but social care is generally like a political hot potato. So I don't know. For me, the jury's out. I'm not too sure I believe it, but I understand how it looks like it's fragmented. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people do agree with you, though. They say it is fragmented and there's lots of different, it's hard to reach. So yeah, different views on that. Someone has mentioned about could learning partnerships be of help here with forums?
Could learning partnerships, sorry?
Learning partnerships be of help with forums? Am I getting mixed up with the chat again? That's Anna. Anna, if you wanted to write that again and just make sure we've got your question right, then please do. And then looking at the comments further down, Jerry's saying the NHS is very fragmented as well, and he's worked in it for a while. So So yeah, everyone's got different experiences, haven't they? So yeah.
I think Matthew's right, though. He's mentioned unpaid carers a couple of times, and he's absolutely right. And, you know, when I worked in Alzheimer's Society, we calculated that unpaid carers are contributing about 11 billion to the care of people with dementia. So if you look at unpaid carers across the whole spectrum of social care, then actually that is a phenomenal amount. And I think that possibly comes in a similar conversation than we were just talking about PAs, in that that they're very easily forgotten when we're talking about these, because they're not necessarily the members of any kind of group, you know, they're individuals. And how do we make sure that we continue to involve unpaid carers and PAs that are employed directly in some of these conversations? And actually, I should have said that within our co-production, unpaid carers are absolutely a part of that. We do have unpaid carers on our co-production steering group. It is people that access care and support and their carers are part of the co-production world. I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was when we had a chat with someone with lived experience, Isaac Samuels, and somebody else, and we were talking about the amount of people who were now carers during COVID, during lockdown, who didn't necessarily identify as carers, but they were carers because they were forced to look after people who needed support because day centres, everything had shut down, and they didn't even realise they were doing that work. So the amount that unpaid carers actually do to support the economy has been huge within this new environment that we're living. Good. Okay. Well, we are coming up to time, and I do want to update people with a few things that we're doing over the next few days. But is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Any burning things that we haven't covered this evening?
Not for me, but I've just seen that Jerry's asked if I can answer a question on when SCIE does co-production, how representative of the breadth of service users and the social care workforce is this? That's a really difficult question to answer, because I'm not entirely sure what you mean. But in terms of our representation, we really look for people to join the co-production steering group that have a variety of different access needs. So we look for, you know, we've got people with a learning disability, we've got older people that are physically disabled, mental health service users, younger people. So we really do try to get across the breadth. How it then impacts onto the social care world, I guess, is dependent on local priorities, which we are trying to influence as well.
Yeah, and I suppose you're trying, like you say, you're trying to get as many people with different experiences rather than a large number of people into those conversations, just because, like you said, you're restricted on your funding. I mean, if you were given more funding to do this great work, then you could have more involvement and get more out of it. But it is a struggle at the moment. And I suppose maybe when people are thinking about what they lobby for, it's organizations like yourselves and people who are doing things in TLAP and everything else that need to have more presence because they aren't a paid membership organization that gets a regular income. So, and we don't want to lose that great work that you all are doing. So yeah, that was fantastic. I really enjoyed that conversation. I said to you would be over in half an hour, didn't I? And it's nearly an hour later, and that just flew past. So really, thank you very much. It's been fantastic talking to you. Stay well, and I'm sure we'll speak to you in a few months' time to see how SCIE is getting on.
Brilliant. Thank you. I've really enjoyed the chat too. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Lovely. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
So that was great. That was a fantastic chat for care that we had just then. I really want to mention before you all shoot off that tomorrow we are doing a webinar at 12:30, and that is talking about care work as women's work. So this all came out from the fact that we did our own consultation part, so we wanted to feed into the Health and Social Care Select Committee, which you've probably heard me talk about a lot. And there were some really interesting themes that came from our 400 questionnaires that we had returned from us from people who work in social care. And one of them was the fact that there is a high proportion of women working in social care, as you all know, and also that, of course, the sector is very much underpaid and some would say undervalued. And we wanted to run a webinar to explore the facts of the overrepresentation of women in there. It's not a bad thing, we're just stating the fact, but also coupled with the issue of it's just not it's also not being supported by the government at the moment, and we need better representation in a sector which is supported by women who are often carers at home as well. So we're going to unpick all of those issues. We're going to have the facts brought to us from Skills for Care. So we're going to have a presentation from them, and then we're going to talk to the Women's Equality Party, who are going to spark off a conversation around it. We have a wonderful intern from a university in Bristol who's been helping us on a summer internship. She's written a blog. If you go onto our website, our blog page, you'll be able to find her blog about this. Some really interesting information she's picked out about how when you're working in care for 20 years, how or to what extent your pay, your hourly pay increases or not, the makeup of staff who are on the ground, the gender differential, and also compared to people who are in high positions within social care, and doing those comparisons. And we really want to talk about the intersectionality of social care. So you've got women who work in the sector, also women with disabilities, or women who have from different ethnicities, and whether that's representative of ethnicities within the country or not. So we're going to have a conversation tomorrow lunchtime about that. We've got some great people speaking, and we really love if you could join us. It's a very small group who have joined us. Someone's saying it's sold out. It shouldn't be sold out. If it has been sold out, then it's just sold out in the last hour randomly. But if it is, I'll check tonight. Please check back tomorrow, and we'll just increase the ticket sales if that's the case. But we'd really love you to join us on that. It's lunchtime, so just lunch and learn with us. So that's really what I wanted to tell you about, and remind you, of course, to subscribe and like. We haven't got anything booked for the next week, but everything could change in the next 24 hours. And we have someone who's fantastic next week joining us for a chat for care. So if you subscribe and if you click the bell on YouTube, then you'll get a notification when we go live or when we plan to go live. And also if you follow and like our page on Facebook, the same will happen. So thank you all very much for joining us today, and we very much wish you have a lovely weekend and the rest of your week, and we will see you soon. Take care, everyone.